All right, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the meeting to order. Call the roll, please.
Mac Rankin,
Present.
Ben Metzger,
Here.
Rob Keller,
Here.
Gary Christensen,
Here.
Tim Mills,
Here.
Ryan Whirling, Sue Wilson.
Here.
All right, all members are accounted for. We have a quorum. Good news and board member reports.
I have Maddie Camps was our South Central Region Teacher of the Year for our STEM program and science program. And so she was able to be recognized, and Ned and Mr. Morris were at that meeting, or at that recognition on March 3rd at the state capitol. So that's a pretty cool recognition for us to have that happen. Yesterday, I spent, I was the safest person in the state of Iowa yesterday. I was able to go to the first annual school safety summit, and I was surrounded by everybody in uniform and hip holsters and guns and all the things. But it was a really good summit. Jay Hackett and Ross Marshall, our SROs, were also there. Just a great, we heard from Sandy Hook, we heard from Columbine, the lessons learned from those things, and some of the things that we need to take into consideration moving forward.
Board member reports. Okay. Delegations, petitions, and communications. Have anyone from the public that would like to speak?
We have not had anyone sign up to speak.
All right, our first action of business then is our consent agenda. For some updates made yesterday. Is there any items on the consent agenda that members would like to pull out and review? Entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion made by Tim,
Second.
seconded by Ryan. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Can I make mention, last month you approved the Busch Stadium Foundation. We had some questions on selling of the tickets. Those have all been sold, plus some. So that bill will be paid.
Excited to hear that. Next item is presentations. Mr. Mink, up first.
Thank you. I thought I'd take a few minutes at this board meeting to talk a little bit about special education funding, because sometimes that has some confusion in the public and in the community. It's really not much different at all than our regular education budget. As you can see in the first slide, which is one you've seen several times before, this is just a particular categorical area of the general fund, which is funded by state aid and property taxes and federal funds. So nothing particularly unusual about funding for special education. As far as the revenue goes, it is implemented in the same way as most of the other funding school district-wide, where it's driven by this aid and levy worksheet. And without getting into much of the minutia of it, an aid and levy worksheet first does a series of probably 100 different calculations to come up with something called a combined district cost. And then the latter part of this aid and levy worksheet is how do you fund that with property taxes, with state aid, and then another set of property taxes. Some of this you'll hear a little bit more about in the news because they want to change that formula up a little bit. We'll have to see how that shakes out at the legislature. Anyway, as you'll see, I have listed there on the slide talking about special education weightings. Essentially, our staff, through an IEP process, along with some help of the AEA staff, determine whether student needs additional help. If they do, they'll categorize them as a level 1, level 2, level 3, which gives them additional weighting. For a level 1, they will get an additional 0.72 of a student, and level 2, 1.21, and level 3, a 2.74 student. So right now, one student runs about $7,836. Then when you add this additional weighting for a level 3 kid, you'd be somewhere in the ballpark of about $30,000 that you're generating in district cost. And then again, like I said, that's funded with property taxes and federal funds and with state aid. The second part of special education funding are these federal funds. The most common known ones are Medicaid as well as Part B funds. Medicaid strictly on a reimbursement basis, so the student would need to qualify to have these Medicaid services, usually health-related services, but they could have to do with transportation or behavior. And then you submit those, and then that money actually have to kind of revert some to the state for the part that they roll, the role that they play in maintaining Medicaid in Iowa, and then the rest comes to us and it offsets our costs. Part IDEA, Part B, is a little more general in the sense that they give us this small amount, about 150,000, or no, it's more right, about 150,000, that we just right now use for excess costs. Usually you'll have increases in salaries or benefits for special education, so that it helps cover that part of it. So again, you've got those three components to funding. So then you look at the expenditure side of special education. It's important to remember that a special education student, their education, their additional education, their additional supports or interventions are not driven by the revenue, they're simply driven by their individualized education program. And again, that's something developed by teachers and the AEA and the parents about what goals we're going to set for this special education student. And then they put them on the levels, they have specialized instruction and the like, and it's not, there's no necessarily connection with the amount of money we get. It is very possible that a level 3 student, if they need assistance in transportation, they need assistance with a one-on-one associate, if they need nursing assistance, if they need other health assistance, if they need assistive devices, that it would be a total cost of about $100,000, and we get $30,000 of that through the weighting. But that doesn't matter because we need to meet the IEP goals. And so there's not a connection between, okay, we only get this much money, so that's how much we can spend. It's maintaining an effort, and that's the next part of it, is what keeps the school district from saying, well, we just don't really have the funds, let's cut back here and there in an IEP. We have federal standard, and it's a right standard as well, to have this maintenance of effort that you're always going to help these special education students meet their goals more and more each year. I think that probably covers it, so that there's no arbitrary cutting of expenditures. There's no reconciliation that we do as far as, okay, this student costs us this much and this is how much we're coming in. All the money comes into basically the big general fund pot, and then our expenditures are governed by the IEP. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
Chad?
Yeah.
So in your example that you give, if you receive $30,000 for a student, but the student's accommodations with the IEP cost $100,000, your slide says that there's opportunities to recoup some of those mechanisms to recoup those costs. What does that look like?
Yeah, so, pardon me, it ends up back in the aid and levy worksheet, but ultimately at the end of the year there is a kind of reconciliation report that we submit with the state called the Special Education Supplement. Ultimately that tells you, did you have a deficit or a surplus in a particular year? Typically school districts will run deficit. We had a small surplus last year, but otherwise that deficit, so when you're adding all the receipts and expenditures together, that deficit you can then take and put back into the aid and levy worksheet and get the revenue back, usually in property taxes, to recoup those costs. So you'll always have, and they give you more budget authority is what that boils down to, as the state does. And then, yeah, you can recoup that through property taxes on the aid and levy worksheet. Any other questions? Very good, thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of the 2025-2026 student fees. Those are attached. They were reviewed by the Finance Committee, and the recommendation was to not make a change. However, we do need to approve them for the year. Is there any questions?
Motion to approve the fees.
Motion made by Ben to approve the fees, seconded by Sue. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item is our 2024-2025 teacher contract renewals for the 2025-2026 school year.
Included in your packet is the salary schedule and the contracts for teachers for next year. As the master contract that was agreed upon 2 years ago mentions, the increase in the salary package for teachers next year will be 3.1%, which drove the included salary schedule. And then obviously teachers move on late in step as needed and come up with the contract amounts that were provided.
In addition to that, we've got TSS funds of $6,400 that remains the same for next year. The contracts pay out the remaining amount to staff members at the end of the year. Are there any questions on the salaries or either the attachments on the contracts?
Is there anything within the legislature that's leaning towards the idea that it wouldn't fall where it normally does? Or
That what?
what we anticipated where it would normally fall, that it will fall in that same area? Is there anything that's come back on that?
Well, as of last week, they're not talking SSA right now, supplemental state aid. It's at 2% in the House, 2.5 in the Senate. They're not talking about that. So our settlement at 3.1 is higher than what we would get in new money coming in anyway. The other thing that's being debated right now is how they're going to pay out that second round of TSS funding to increase the minimums. So last year, every district got a cut of that TSS funding. What they're talking about right now is that if you don't need it, you wouldn't get it. Yeah. So it's a change from what they originally had said. But they're trying to bring those costs down to what's going to the schools. So that's one of the things out there. But again, that's been silent over the last couple weeks. Okay.
Any other questions?
Make a motion to approve the assurance of the listed certified state contracts on March 15th, 2025.
Sue? Second. Seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mac Rankin,
Aye.
Ben Metzger,
Aye.
Rob Keller,
Aye.
Eric Christensen,
Aye.
Tim Mills,
Aye.
Ryan Worthing,
Aye.
Sue Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries 7-0. The next item is the annual revision of handbooks for the 2025-2026 school year.
So our principals have worked really hard to get the handbooks updated for you, and so that we could look at them and hopefully approve them tonight. One of the things that happened last year is we started registration, asked people to sign off on the handbooks, but they were last year's handbooks. So we want to make sure that we have the most updated and current handbooks out there. Now, the caveat to that is there are some things happening in legislation that will tell us they need to be in handbooks. We will get them, just like we did last year with the chronic absenteeism, we will get them in board policy, which will trump a handbook every time. We'll get them in board policy and then make sure that we get those updated either later this fall, or we'll wait until next year. We'll have them in policy and then add them to the handbooks next year.
Any questions or concerns with any of the revisions? Rebecca?
I don't have a question, but I like the way that the attendance is read. It's a lot easier to understand.
You and everyone else.
So one of your examples of something coming through legislation that we would make a policy on would be whatever we're deciding on cell phones in schools, because I know that's in legislation right now. And that's why none of that is in the handbooks yet.
Correct.
Okay.
We will not, even if that were to pass, the earliest that we would have anything would be July 1.
Right.
That's when they're mandated to give us all of those things. That's the earliest. It might be like chronic absenteeism right before the school year starts. But again, we'll get that in board policy, which then is followed anyway. And then it's followed there.
Are these individual motions?
Just one.
Or one vision motion?
Unless there's something you want to pull.
Move to approve the revised handbooks.
Motion made by Eric to approve the 2025-2026 handbooks. Seconded by Tim. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item is the SIAC committee report.
Yeah, so the meeting minutes are there, that we met March 3rd, which was our third meeting of this year. And we had a high school counselor and middle school counselor present, and they shared an overview of our Zello software with the committee. Zello is that software that we use for our students from middle school, high school, so they can explore their interests in careers, personality traits, things like that. They also use that system to create that 4-year plan as they go through the high school. Oftentimes, we refer to that piece of it as their ICAP, their individual career and academic plan that's required in 8th grade. Because that report now is up to like 67 pages, we pulled out 2 sections of that for the committee to look at. The first one was section 3 on the FAFSA advisement, that federal application for student aid. And we just talked a lot about how can we improve that communication to parents and also increase their involvement. Because I think at times when we're talking about the DCAP plan, there's so much information in there and things that we're doing in the district. And there's a feeling that that's being communicated out, but somehow there's a gap between that communication and parents really understanding, well, what is that 4-year plan? What is Zello? Or how do I go and get information about the FAFSA? So that input from the SIAC was very, very important. The other piece to that we were taking a look at, just based on parent involvement, they talked about these suggestions here that wasn't limited to this, but just the idea of creating some type of a hub or a one-stop place to go to with all of the different things that they can need to go into for accounts. Like they might have something for food service, or sometimes they have to go to something for transportation, or just a variety of things. But if they had like a one-stop hub, even though it might take them into different products, that would be nice from their standpoint. But offering more informational sessions at the night of parent-teacher conferences, just another draw to get parents into the buildings. Maybe some of this could be asynchronous too and put online if parents aren't here on site. But from the students that were present, just utilizing high school seniors and juniors, getting some of that peer involvement with our students to explain courses, especially to middle school students as they're trying to, we kind of get their identity. And when you're starting to form your identity as to what occupation you might want to explore, working with the peers sometimes might be less intimidating for them. And then also, this was a unique one that hasn't come up before, but when we talk about 529 plans, which are plans that parents can invest in. You know more financially, but you can invest in those 529 plans, some tax-free type monies. But to get that information out to elementary parents, so if they want to start planning for post-secondary education, we can help them understand some pieces to that. So even getting it down to elementary. The other part too is, I think part of that gap with feeling that the information gets sent out to parents, sometimes the newsletters they're saying from their buildings are so full of information, and by not chunking it and sending smaller bits in between and making sure that subject line is specific to what the information is, but at a minimum bumping up some of the more important things to the tops of the newsletters, because they say they're just getting lost in all of it. And that part too is interesting, because SIAC had talked a couple of years ago about like what is the perfect level of communication, and you know, some people want a lot more, others want less, but if we can just do a more focused intention on calling out the really important things in those communications, would be appreciated. So that was the impact from SIAC from that meeting.
Thank you, Annette. Any questions? Next item is to review the district career and academic plan.
So I think Shelley's going to pull up just a few slides about this, because this is the plan, the 67-page plan that's also included in there for you, but these are just some of the highlights from it. This particular plan has these, whoa, Shelley, whoa. Yeah, they have.
That's 67 pages.
Right, no, I heard that. So in that plan, which is required and submitted to the Department of Education, these are the sections of the information that are in there. And the department keeps adding on each year. This year was the FAFSA that was called out. But annually, I need to present some of this information to you, so I'm pulling some of the specific pieces. But the plan lists all the team members that are on it. There's a summary of the work that has been taking place. There's a section for the 4-year course planning, like specifically, how are we getting that done in the district? What does that look like? Our efforts for work-based learning are in there. That section is probably one of the longer ones, because in our district, overwhelmingly, some of the work-based learning things that we do, whether it's career exploration, it's listed out by the course or the teacher, like what are they doing within those courses for work-based learning. We also talk about the section in there on the ICAP, which is that individual plan, and how are we getting work-based learning opportunities in that 4-year plan for students. And then the essential components of it. I'll talk a little bit about why that's our goal area of improving that. And then again, how do we get information to parents about the FAFSA? So that essential components section itself has 5 subsections to it. And those subsections are the things that, for the most part, our students, when they get into the Zello software, it has lessons and modules and plans for them that they work through that address these. So kids can do things that help them to understand themselves more. Like, what do you like? What do you dislike? Would you like to work outside more? Would you like more of the office area? Do you like talking in front of people or not? So they kind of get a feel for their skills. So all of those essential components are things that are hit upon in that software and things that we provide to the students. Now, last year, some of the work that was done was to create a logo, that career quest. We're starting down that pathway. Diploma tracker was found within PowerSchool, which was a tool, because that question was, how can we help parents understand if their students are making progress towards their graduation credits? So that was put in place and should be happening this year to help parents understand that. A presentation was given to all of our teachers on the 3 parts of work-based learning. And again, the department has been changing the definitions, but now it means that students would be studying that particular career or work-based opportunity. If they go and then experience it, that's the second part. And how are they engaging with the career while they are experiencing it, either on site or during a field trip? And the third part is when they come back from that, there has to be a reflection. There has to be something to try to connect them with what they're learning currently in school, and or how would you get to that career path if that's something you want to explore further. those three parts were worked into the field trip request format, which hits the elementary a little bit more than the other levels. But even at that age level, we're trying to get them to be thinking about, what do you like? What did you learn? Those kinds of things. And then because this particular report or the requirements of work-based learning have really just exploded exponentially over the last 5 years, we did create a focus group with interested teachers to help keep reviewing this plan, giving input, and that's kind of in addition to that subset of our CTE, our Career Tech Ed advisories from the high school, when they meet yearly to review that plan too. So the plans are reviewed every year. In 23-24, the RPP is our regional planning partnership, where us with kind of a consortium of other districts, we're all put together and they have a process in which they score us. At that point, our score was 19 out of 36, where 6 of our 12 areas were considered developing. 5 of those were proficient and 1 area was advanced. And so that's a new rubric. It no longer included the scoring levels that we had used the year before, where we had a 28 out of a 36 score, and 8 of those were at the highest level that we could get. So as they're learning more, they're making things more rigorous, and it's kind of changing the measurement, but we're up for that challenge. The Heartland ADA School District's average score was 14.8 at that point. So we dug into that. We're finding out more of what they're looking for. Jill, you can move to that next one. And so one of the areas where we feel could be our biggest leverage point, right, because there's a lot there, but what could we do here in Indianola, at least at this point with the resources that we have, to make a change? And the DCAP team had decided we were going to increase our scores in section 5 of the rubric, and that's those 5 essential components of the ICAP. We want to increase that by 1 level in every section that was in there, while also creating a very detailed description of that high school course planning process to make sure parents understand if you are looking at concurrent enrollment with DMAC, what does that look like, even from 8th grade, and trying to make sure that parents are much more involved in that planning process. Because right now they do need to sign off on it in 8th grade, but then it's reviewed with the student each year. And it seems like that's where it gets lost a little bit too, with keeping parents involved in that. The Career and Tech Advisory Committee members, they continue to meet with their groups every year, and those advisories for our CTE courses, they take a look at and give input. Is our content staying relevant in those courses? Are they updated? Some of their recommendations from the last few years have led into us developing that Introduction to Hospitality course. An Introduction to Business course has been added. We changed over one of our courses to be Wildlife Management, added Accounting 3, and that's also when the School to Career course was added to the high school. So those advisories help keep us current, and they're also reviewed once every 5 years. They're on a rotation, and we have to have our CTE programs approved by the Department of Ed. And then we continue to look at certifications. So this last page here, this is a requirement from, again, the reporting out to the board is just the usage of that Zello program that we've selected Zello to create those ICAP plans. So that's the data from 8th grade through 12th grade. And you'll notice the development of the ICAP occurs only in the 8th grade. That's when it's first put in place. They're to sign it in 8th grade. Then every year since that, they're to be reviewed or revised annually up at the high school level. And we want to make sure that there are goals that the students have stated for after they graduate. We want to make sure they're completing all of those essential components of their plan. And that last row was just the enrollment of May of 2020 or 23-24. So for example, when you look at 8th grade, at the end of the year, there were 320 8th graders. Well, 312 of them actually finished their ICAP plan with those components. So that's part of what they're trying to hit even harder to make sure that those are done for every student. That every student really feels like they have an idea as to what they want to do once they graduate. And that plan in its entirety, for right now, unless there were things that you wanted to have changed in the plan, I would submit it to the Department of Ed later this month. And then I would say a couple meetings ago, you had voiced your support, like when I wanted to change one of our teacher leadership positions. We created a new one for our counseling and career teacher leader, and that'll be Lacey Chernus from the middle school. So as one of our teacher leaders, she will now start supporting, making sure this plan's getting done, help supporting our counselors with different supports that they need, because we know that counseling can be pulled in many different areas. So that's one way of using the resources that we already have to try and make this even stronger in Indianola.
Any questions?
You said the RPP stands for what?
Regional Planning Partnership, pretty sure.
And then, so 28 out of 36 the previous year, or 22 to 23 for that rubric. Rubric changes, and I remember you talking to us about this in the past. Who, does that RPP group, do they establish the rubric? Who changes the rubric?
I think somebody at the higher level in the Department of Ed would create the rubric, and then that is disseminated to the regional planning partnerships in the state. They also have people that are either working through I would say the Department of Ed. It gets a little blurry with the AEA agencies, because our person was actually kind of working for both. But they will hire people and train them to then score our plans. So, and then they'll give us feedback to say, hey, think about this. Is this one of your more priorities? So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Next item is to consider approval of the high school English 10 novel selection that was presented to the curriculum committee.
And I do want to call out for this one, we weren't able to meet that month, so I sent the material to the committee. So when it says that on here that the committee supports the selection, that might not be I think that's a general wording that always goes in here, but I had not heard concerns back from the committee either. So this would be the first time that they would be able to talk about that. But this came from the English, for the English 10 class, and the documents that were provided to you in there include our process where they get information either from a community member or parent reviewing it, some student input, and then their rationale as to why they're asking to add that novel. We developed that process over the last several years because we really wanted to make sure that you felt comfortable with enough information for things that you're approving, while at the same time, if a parent does not want their student to read a certain novel, the teachers have to have an alternate selection that they could offer to them.
Any comments, concerns?
See the motion?
Is there a motion? Motion made by Ryan to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Making our way through to the technology section of the agenda. The next item is consider approval of contract for network firewall services. Shelley, were you filling in for Ray on this part?
Let Eric take over.
Okay. Did you guys talk about this and?
We skipped our most recent
Yep.
technology meeting, but
We talked
think
about
we've
this one
discussed it, right?
a couple times ago. It's our E-rate. And as Ray had shared with me, he wished we could wait until April, but E-rate is due at the end of March. And so what happens is, we submit our plan, it's gonna be the firewall services, network services. And they say, yep, we agree with that, we will pay you 75% of that, you have to pay 25% out of your budget for that, so it's on a reimbursement rate. So he wishes he was here for one, I'm sure he's missing us greatly. But also hopes that you will accept this proposal. There were 6 different bids that came in. And actually, he said the one that they really thought was going to be the winning bid was not, so. So it is my recommendation that you take his recommendation for the firewall.
motion to approve the contract for network firewall services as presented.
Motion made by Eric,
Second.
seconded by Ben. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Monthly financial reports are attached. Is there any questions on the financials?
Anything significant with it, Chad?
No, I didn't, I didn't think so. Very ho-hum for this month.
Did you say ho-hum?
Ho-hum, yeah. I usually don't get terribly excited until we get to the April ones and the October ones and get property taxes in, so.
Got some internet issues going on.
I'm assuming
Do you
it's the
guys-
exact same one in our packet, right?
This is working
Yeah.
great.
My iPad's not refreshing either.
I'll make a motion to approve the monthly financial.
Motion made by Ben,
Second.
seconded by Tim. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I think I'm on the other network, and
Yeah, because you
what
have
you guys
it.
are, mine's working. Finance Committee meeting report from the 18th of February. Either I get it, Tim? You take that one?
Don't need a new firewall, this thing's working pretty good.
Everybody up.
I'm trying to remember February 18th.
Big one was budget, certified budget,
Student fees and.
student fees and then certified budget.
Student fees, we voted on that already. Certified budget development. Chad provided information on the committee about the proposed certified budget for fiscal year 2026. Detailed the effects of enrollment on funding, increase in valuation, proposed tax rate, the prognosis of additional funding from the legislature, the effect of the district's cash balance, the schedule for debt repayment, and the current unspent authorized budget authority. Chad emphasized that due to the high cash balance, the aid and levy formula will compel the district to spend down its cash balance, causing expenditures to exceed revenues for the next few years. There was a lot of discussion about the tax rate, publications and information being provided to the public over the next couple of months, as well as coordination with the city and county. That was important because, we had that same approach when we looked at the high school. We wanted to make sure that we were nested, and that was kind of the topic of discussion when at the finance committee meeting, was just making sure that we're nested. As we go forward to the public. Committee agreed to publish the proposed budget with a 2.5% state percent of growth and a tax rate of 1770, knowing that the percentage may be lower and the board can reduce the levy when they adopt the budget in April.
Questions for Finance Committee? Okay. Next item is the Facility Committee report from March 6th, last week.
Yeah. Facilities, we talked about, well, I'll go in order of the screen here. Talked about buses. Some districts are going to an air-conditioned bus. It's a cost of approximately $10,000 per bus with an additional $35,000 for the equipment needed to service it. This committee does, that kind of runs opinion of it is it's not necessary, is that accurate? And I think after, we didn't really discuss our opinions of it so much, but after leaving that meeting, that's kind of my opinion of it as well. You know, save some money in that respect. We talked about the baseball, softball renovation project. We looked at some specs and some drawings on that and kind of overall costs, where that's looking at. And so that's gonna go out to bid, was it May? April, yep. April, it'll be at the April board meeting, and then bids potentially in May with anticipation of the start date soon after the conclusion of this baseball and softball season. And then assuming everything goes on schedule, it would be ready then for the following season by spring. So the drawings look great, really good. Also, Bernie had talked about outside of the scope of that project, just doing it on our own, and Bernie's done a really good job of saving us money with the dugouts and some other things doing on our own. Talked about replacing the screen behind home plate at the baseball diamond with a netting and being able to maintain the poles there. We also talked about some considerations for the high school renovation for the next phase, and so it wouldn't really affect what's going on over there right now, but it essentially would involve reconfiguring and then adding some space to enlarge the wrestling room to make sure that we can have 4 mats versus 3, and just some potential, there were several options. One, shrunk the size of the weight room slightly but kept all the equipment, and added 4 mats versus 3 in the wrestling room, and then the other kept the weight room the same size and kept the wrestling room addition. And then the nice thing about that is it put it all on the second level, which then put mechanical and stuff down below, which would create a storm shelter. I think the general consensus was from that agreement that meeting that the bang for the buck is there as far as how much additional it would cost. It's obviously going to be beneficial. Wrestling is obviously one of our more popular sports right now, and it just continues to grow with the addition of girls wrestling, which has grown from, they have 8 girls their first year to, I mean, the team keeps growing. So that's what we talked about. I missed anything?
The only thing that I remembered some discussion about, I think was in there, was the scoreboard, but they're working to see if, they're troubleshooting the scoreboard to see if they could fix it before we had to entertain any ideas of whether it needed to be replaced.
Football stadium scoreboard.
Yeah.
And I did put some of that discussion in the Friday update, just some of those costs and what we're gonna try and do before we are forced to change it. So.
Phase 2 involve storage space for the theater and the fine arts programs. Is that phase 2 or is that phase 1?
That would be phase 1, and there will be plenty of storage for lots of things. Yeah, essentially in phase 2, what we want to do is elongate it, one for the wrestling, and try and, I didn't understand the importance of the 4 mat configuration, but in terms of a classroom. You wouldn't stand on one end of a classroom and try and demonstrate and hope that the people on the other end are seeing you, right? So if you put them in a square, coaches can demonstrate, they can practice in the center, and everybody can see that, and then they can go to their mats and do that. Also, just for ease of monitoring, you can have people walking the center and seeing what's going on and safety of that. What this also does is it allows us to be able to host large events with both sides of the bleachers coming out, because we'll be able to get 3 mats down the center of the gym versus having to put them in an L shape where you'd have to keep one side of the bleachers tucked in. So it elongates the gym to be able to do that. It gives us additional space for locker rooms and things like that.
The storm shelter area, any idea how many people we can get into that?
I would guess quite a few, yeah.
Last year, we needed 800.
The whole gym is your storm shelter.
Yeah, because it would essentially be the entire space below the weight room and the wrestling room on the west side. So it'd be a large space.
So ideally, I wanted to put all the HVAC systems on the roof, right? I didn't understand why wouldn't we put them on the roof and use the space? Well, because that's a storm shelter. Those have to be rated differently, which is where I think Ben was going, is that area has to be maintained downstairs, or we had additional costs to put them on the roof to maintain their storm shelter.
One other thing too, two things. And Chad had asked during that meeting, and he doesn't seem to be concerned with what the additional cost would be, so I think that's important. And I don't know that it would stress us too much financially, so that's an important piece of it too. But then the other piece too is with that wrestling room, it would obviously be right next door to the weight room during non-wrestling season. You know, two of those mats could be lifted up, and then that's now a functional space for other activities as well.
Any other questions for facilities? Okay, we're gonna go back to the conversation about the buses. We've got the proposal as our next item. This is broke down a couple of different ways. Both the standard 77 passenger bus with and without air conditioning, and a wheelchair accessible bus, both with and without air conditioning. Is there any questions? Ron is here to answer all the questions that we have.
Can you scroll back just a second, Shelley, so I can?
Less pricing one?
Well, I think it's in a nut graph right there. I just wanted to look at that one.
What's the expected life for these buses?
15 years. And it's set up for the two wheelchair and a regular ed bus delivered for this school year, and then the 3 will be the next school year. So it's a two, we bid them 2 school years.
Is that 15 years, is that how long the districts hangs on to them, or just the overall expectancy of it?
Well, we're selling some right now, and they think they're gonna last another 5 years, so, 20 years maybe. But with our inspections and stuff that we have to put them through, you start putting in a lot more body work in them, fixing the rust holes where other people don't necessarily have to keep that up. It's not the powertrain or that very seldom goes bad. It's the flooring, it's the side panels, the rust.
So you're thinking that the district would get at least 15 years of use out of them?
I love the response on GovDeals where it says, have these buses been ran on salted roads? And it's like, yeah, duh, we live in Iowa. Unless there's more conversation.
Your recommendation is to not move forward with the air conditioning?
I would stay away from air conditioning for a couple of reasons. It's that maintenance on the air conditioned units do run a little more money, and you're putting $50,000 more into these buses, which I think $50,000 could be spent somewhere else more efficient in the schools, because you're only talking maybe 2 months and a lot of that's July and August, So, and the other thing is the AC, when they come full AC, they only have 1-year warranty on them. If you want a 3-year warranty, it's going to cost another $845 a bus. So to me, they're just not there. And even the salesman said, you see some out there that first came out with air conditioning that are 8-9 years old. They're not running their air anymore. It's shot. So I wouldn't put them in there. I just don't see a big need. Now, if we were a year-round school with everybody, maybe, because then you got, instead of having 24 routes during the regular school year, we only have 5 during the summer. You know, so,
Ron, wasn't it another $35,000 for the machine to maintain
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
AC as well? So that's like
Jason's certified.
$5,000.
Jason's certified, but you have to get recertified to do the air conditioner work.
Yeah.
So,
It's until that machine breaks down and needs repair. So,
As we're thinking about that air conditioning, right, for after school, those are pretty short routes. What, I assume you've thought through also, travel to sporting events during some of those hotter days, or travels to the marching band competitions and all that, but.
pretty much have the windows open once they're rolling. Now, our 5 newest buses do have air conditioning in the front, and that's to help with windshield defrost. It's just to climate control the front. It was built on driver, so the first front seats possibly could. We haven't ran a hot day with them yet on the new ones, so.
Are these set up that same configuration? I'd make a motion to receive the one bid for the purchase of diesel school buses from Ward Sale Hogland Bus Company for 4 77-passenger school buses and 1 lift bus as presented. Without AC? Yeah, without AC. Yep.
second that.
Motion made by Tim, very detailed. By Ben, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. The most exciting part of the night.
Oh, yeah.
Is this the karaoke section?
This is the karaoke section.
You're first up, Eric.
Careful.
Eric, you start. First of all, I do want to apologize for, first and second readings look different. But I was trying to, as we start to get more policies and review them, how we can categorize them a little bit, so when you're reading them, you actually know what we're doing or what we're trying to do to update. So second reading is still jumbled. However, I've laid out first reading differently, and going forward, I think that will be the layout. So you'll know what we're reviewing, what we're revising, rescinding, those types of things. So I do think Director Whirling should be the one to review our last meeting.
Second.
The slopes were nice. Nice. Had a good time skiing. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
So no
Glad you
policy
had a
had
great
to you.
I can grab this one. Pretty much reviewed the entire 400 series, it felt like. IASB is diligently working through our complete policy review, finalizing all of that. So it was a little bit bigger month. As you can see on the 409 and 413 policies for review, there were not any suggested changes on those. The 200 series and 400 series of revised were pretty much wordsmithing. 200.1R1 added vice president to the language. 200 has some income updates to how much a board member can make as an employee before they become ineligible to serve as a board member. That increased from $6,000 to $20,000 based on legislation. Code of Ethics was updated. The standing committees was reviewed. Regular meeting notice, open meetings, public complaints, employee leave of absence, FMLA for employees, along with the regulation and form. Those are all attached. We did not make any critical adjustments to any of those outside of, excuse me, what IASB recommended on those. Because of some of the changes in both legislation and the reviews that IASB did, you will see that there are a handful of policies that have basically become rescinded or homeless now. They've changed those policies to different numbers or incorporated them in different policies. So there are a handful out of the 400 series as well as one out of the 200 series that has the language been moved to a different policy number. Those are all attached. And then there were some grammatical corrections that were made to 4 policies between the 200 and 400 series that are all attached, as well as 2 new policies, 210.01 and the 210.08E1. Both of those were related to our annual meeting and our regular board meeting agendas. Those are both attached as well. I'm happy to answer any questions on any of those or walk through them if anyone has anything specifically they would like to know.
So those rescinded policies, they haven't changed as far as their substance, they're just embedded in a different subchapter.
So they took basically each of those are leaves that you offer as a board to employees. And IASB said we no longer have them as separate policies, we're condensing them into one policy. And so they're listed in 40902.
Is Siobhan still on the?
She
Oh,
is, yep. She's the one that does our review.
yeah. I know, I was on this committee for probably longer than I needed to be. It's a fun one.
Yep.
It's important work, though. You guys are doing a good job on this committee.
You're not saying we're cleaning up your work.
You could be.
Good catch, Eric, good catch.
Could be. But with that, I'll make a motion to approve the first and second readings.
Motion made by Ben for first and second reading of the policy updates.
Second.
Seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item is the board calendar. Really exciting update for the calendar. Next week is spring break. For those of you that didn't know, we have a curriculum meeting this Thursday. There are no meetings next week. IT and policy will meet the week after spring break. We do have our special board meeting Tuesday morning, April 3rd at 7 a.m. That should be hopefully pretty quick. It's a public hearing for our budget on property taxes. Following that, as soon as we get done with that, roughly 7:10, we'll have the facilities committee meeting. Then we finish out April and May as presented there on the report. Are there any changes that anybody needs to have made to any of these meetings?
And just for clarification, that budget hearing, there will be an identical conversation right at the next board meeting that follows?
Yep, exactly. So this, that's even a good point, Eric. This particular budget hearing is on, the mailing that they get or whatever, and it's really geared towards just the property tax increase. And then that there is another hearing at our April board meeting, and that will be on adoption of the entire certified budget.
Public hearing, listen to whatever we need to listen to, answer any questions that we have, and then close it. There shouldn't be any
Correct.
action.
There's no action.
Unless something comes up that we need to add to it, but personnel-wise or anything like that. But as far as the budget goes, there wouldn't be any action. Cabinet, you guys good on dates for all of that stuff? Okay. With that being said, we've concluded.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Ryan to adjourn the meeting.
Second it.
Seconded by Ben. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Have a good night.
Thanks, Rob.
See you guys.
Let's see.